Can they hear me? Can they hear me live out there? Next beat. That ain't the beat I wanted to do.
Those was wood
another
beats
beat.
right
Another
there.
beat. Nope. Give me another beat. Give me another beat. Nope. That's not it. That's the beat. Turn it up.
Oh, word.
Turn it up. I gotta hear it a little louder. Can you make it louder than my headphones? Turn me up in my headphones. I'm still stuck in the 80s/90s. Lottos, kangaroo boots, natty ghosts, Beelers, jumpsuits and troops, Junos, color Levi's, Bugs Bunny sweaters with the rhinestone ring on it. Fighting and making up the next day. Nobody getting shot. Working a hustle and to get it, a get got. We had love for the streets, our family, our foes, our friends. Respect for the elderly. Pager/payphone, sneaking into Adams Theater. Watching Crush grooving tougher than leather. Hopping gates out the college port to bang out, cause you don't wanna get caught at mom's crib or at Von's crib. Eating funny dinner with the fam. Church every Sunday, 8 o'clock a.m. And even if I fell asleep in the back row or played sick, no matter what, man, I still had to go 80s, baby. He's a DJ, I'm a rapper.
Welcome.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Oh, now we're here. Now we're live. My bad. Welcome, everybody. This is the XCast on the EmpireMedia.com. XCast number 55M. To be precise, it's day 4,833 in the search for Tim Chevelday. This is a special episode of the XCast. This is one of our Deep Issues casts. And tonight's Deep Issue was selected not last week, not last month, but quite a while ago.
This was like the second pick that we did, but we decided to move it.
Well, it was, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And basically the reason we decided to move it is because this week's Deep Issues XCast is about 9/11 conspiracies. And we thought, know what? We got a show scheduled for 9/12. Why not cover 9/11? So we bumped it back. We've been looking forward to this one for a long time. I am your host, Josh Houslander. With me, as always, producer Adam Hernandez, the wind beneath my wings, my hero. And, of course, our Deep Issues specialist, Ed Zaharsky, who we weren't sure if he was going to make it today because his wife is like 13 months pregnant right now. But, so if you all of a sudden stop hearing Ed talk, it's because he ran out of here like the Flash and needs to go take care of his wife and his kid-to-be. But the kid still didn't come, so we're good. We're good. And we need Ed here for this one. So I'm really glad that his old lady hung on to that kid as long as possible. So we need Ed here for this show because Ed is a Deep Issues expert. He is also a 9/11 conspiracies expert. This is Ed's like wheelhouse here. So we need him here for this one. He's gonna be the catalyst tonight. He's gonna be the one, throwing it out there for us. And
you're really putting the pressure on Ed here.
I love putting pressure on Ed.
Laying it out.
Whatever. I can handle it.
No, he can handle it. He's good. Ed knows what's up. So yeah, Ed's gonna be our crazy conspiracist tonight. Adam is gonna be our statist. And I'm going to be, as always, I'm going to be right in the middle, just being logical and awesome.
Wait, wouldn't that be the opposite of being the statist, though?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. No, I'm going to just be the super smart one that's just like, finds the common ground between Ed and Adam. But
there once were two buildings in New York.
So what's up, guys? Adam, Ed, how's it going, buddy? With buddies, what's up?
It's going good.
It's good.
Cool. This is a show we've been looking forward to for a long time. So I guess, let's break it down. Just super simple at the beginning. Let's put it in Ed's words, Ed's terminology. Do you believe the official story of 9/11, or do you believe that something else went down that day? I guess that's the big question. One thing I do want to preface, I do want to say, before we get started here, because I feel like sometimes this gets lost a little bit in the world of 9/11 conspiracies. But 2,996 people died that day. 6,000 people were injured. People from over 90 countries. 18 were rescued alive, all that stuff. Just because you believe or don't believe in a 9/11 conspiracy doesn't mean that what happened that day didn't suck. Doesn't mean that what happened that day wasn't tragic, and it doesn't mean that you can't mourn for or pray for the people and the families of the people that died that day. So I think a lot of times people who believe in a 9/11 conspiracy get lumped in with these like, oh, you're hating on 9/11. No, not at all, actually.
It's not just the people who died either. There are a lot of people with major health issues who have died since or in really poor health due to basically being right outside and breathing in everything that they did, and now they've got cancer or some other issue that really sucks.
Yeah, so I do just really want to preface that we're doing this the day after the 16th anniversary of 9/11. And whether it was an inside job or the Illuminati or aliens or George Bush's fault or really just a couple of crazy hijackers, terrorists. Either way, it's tragic, and we mourn for the people that lost their lives that day. And we celebrate the heroes that helped out that day. You know, those firemen running up there that day were, their heroic nature doesn't change because the true story is, because the official story is true or because the official story is not true. Do you guys agree? You guys are all with me here, right? Yeah,
yep.
Right? This is important. So we're not undermining the life or the death of any person by simply talking about, is there some legitimate things to discuss here when it comes to this? One thing I want to start with. Bill Cooper, William Milton Cooper. Kind of like the original conspiracist, if you will, in a lot of ways. Kind of the guy that a lot of people got started on. Did tons of writing on this stuff back in the day, later hosted Hour of the Time, a conspiracy show. He was killed before 9/11 happened. And he was killed by federal agents. Many, those federal agents claimed that he pulled a gun or that he was aggressive or something. But Bill Cooper, who died before 9/11 could happen, predicted 9/11 on June 28th of 2001. He basically said that day, something is going to happen, and when it does happen, the government is going to blame Osama bin Laden. This was said on June 28th, 2001. I wasn't listening at the time. That happened to be my 21st birthday, so I was probably drunk while Bill Cooper was announcing this. But that is irrelevant at this point. I'm just pointing out that was my 21st birthday. But to me, that alone does make me question some of what we know or what we think we know about this. Ed, I know you're a big Bill Cooper fan.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff he said is very intriguing. A lot of things he said have definitely come true. A lot of things he says are very profound. A lot of stuff he said is really pretty crazy too.
No, I think he was a honest man who had some good sources and probably some not so good sources, right, and was honest in his search for the truth. And not everything he said, there was, I don't think it was necessarily because of him that it was wrong. I think in his heart he kind of believed it, but he probably had some
or he was
poor
just
sources.
Simply putting it out there for you to analyze.
Yeah. I don't think he intentionally meant to sway people in the wrong direction like maybe some others have.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was very honest in his search for the truth, and not everything he said was wrong.
No, a lot of things he said were definitely right. And basically his point that I've always taken issue with the news coverage we've gotten when it comes to Osama bin Laden. The news coverage and the official stories we've gotten when it comes to this man. Basically his point was, listen, supposedly the CIA and the FBI and the Secret Service and every single entity within the United States government and all these other supposedly amazing entities within foreign governments are all searching for Osama bin Laden. And now all of a sudden, some CNN cameraman just found Osama bin Laden's hideout, and he granted him an interview, and now everything is just okay, and he's just going to give an interview. So some reporter could find him, but the CIA and the FBI couldn't, is basically what the official story was. And what he was saying then was, listen, it's obvious to me that something's going to happen, and when it does, Osama bin Laden is going to get blamed for it. So, let's talk about it, guys. Official story, Osama bin Laden, what's up?
So, would it be worthwhile to recap what the actual official story is?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, 9/11, 2001, 19 Arab hijackers hijacked 4 different planes, 2 767s and 2 757s, crashed 2 of them into the Twin Towers. One of them was crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the other one crashed into the side of the Pentagon. The 2 towers eventually collapsed due to a structural collapse basically from the impact, and also World Trade Center 7 due to fire that was caused by that, even though the building wasn't hit, also collapsed.
Huh.
I don't know if there's anything I missed in that, anything we'd like to add of what officially came out?
No, I think that's probably about all we'll agree on up until here. But yeah, that is true. Absolutely true. I mean, planes were hijacked, hit the Pentagon, hit the World Trade Center, and then one went down in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, United 93.
Yep.
But yeah, 2 planes hit the World Trade Center, 1 hit the Pentagon, 1 plane went down in that field in Pennsylvania. So I agree with that.
Okay. So where do we want to go first? What area of this? How about the hijackers?
Okay, go ahead.
So, these hijackers, we know all their names and we have their photos. Never flew any of these planes that they flew. They basically were living in the country over the summer, maybe a little bit before that. They found private instructors that basically they were using to have them teach them how to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I guess as it goes, they learned from that. And then, that day came, they brought box cutters onto the plane, and using those box cutters, they made their way into the cockpit, took over, and then piloted, to glory, I guess, from their angle. So the instructors that were teaching these people were interviewed afterwards, and actually basically there were reports, I think, from some of their lessons. Essentially, some of the instructors were quoted as saying these people were unfit to fly solo, as in they wouldn't even let this person, like one of the guys wanted to go up there and take control of the plane on his own, and he couldn't go up on the plane on his own.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we're supposed to believe that this guy actually manually flew this plane into a building.
Pilotless.
Yeah, pilotless. Because here's the thing is that they know the entire flight path of all of these planes, and you can't just hit autopilot. You can't just say, World Trade Center, go there.
Right.
Even though they were autopiloted for part of it, they know that going into that, they actually were taken off autopilot and then manually flown the rest of the way.
Yeah, well, you would have to be, right?
Yes.
To do this, because the autopilot is set for set destination.
At the airport.
To the airport. So you can't just, there isn't an autopilot setting for this side of the building.
Yeah, and a 757 or 767 is not like a Cessna. I mean, it's almost like we're expected to believe every movie we've ever seen where, some flight attendant or somebody else who's seen an airplane before says, oh yeah, I know what those things are. I'll just take over in the cockpit and, roughly land us somewhere. But I guess more on that later. But with the hijackers, so we basically have no pictures of any of them at the airports. You would think, if you've gone to an airport, and it was like this back in 2001, you would have security cameras everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You have security cameras going in, you have every hallway you walk down, even every little store that you can go in there has their own security cameras, of which will catch people walking by in the hallways. You have...
Well, they did. They did have them going through security, and...
They had basically one photo with the timestamp, because all these security cameras have timestamps. They had one photo of that day, and it wasn't even the flight they said that they were going to be on. Months later, they released a short video without a timestamp on it at one of the locations showing a couple more of them coming through. The thing about that, too, is that these cameras basically take what's essentially like one frame a second. It's like a bunch of stills together. It's not like a fluid video like you go to YouTube and you watch it. This one looked more like an actual, like somebody sitting there with a camcorder and piloting them, in zero timestamp whatsoever. So why would they remove the timestamp from the security camera to release it to the public? How do you even know that's when it was from? You know, they did say that these hijackers supposedly took flights during the summer, you know, as kind of a dry run beforehand. Sure. It could have just as easily have been from one of those. So they did come out and say that essentially there was an issue at 2 of the 3 airports, and so they couldn't get any. You still have the other airport, and you also have you have everywhere in the airport that you could get photos from these guys. You'd think you would have thousands of photos. You know, they don't even have to release that many, but they could say, hey, look at this is them getting on. This is them going through the checkpoint. This is them buying a Snickers bar before they get on the plane, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You have none of that. Where are all the photos at? Why would they not release them? Even if anything, to basically say, you debunkers are full of shit, you know, here's a few photos, shut up.
This is a point I've always tried to make in the past too, Ed, where when you have these conspiracies and people say they're ridiculous, you say, why don't they, if they are ridiculous, and they very well might be, why don't they come out and slam them? I always say this about the moon landing conspiracy. The moon landing conspiracy, I don't believe in. I believe that we did go to the moon. But I'm always like, why doesn't NASA just come out with all the answers to these questions and just put an end to this? But they don't.
Yep.
And I feel like this is the case here with 9/11 too, is that if these claims are ridiculous, then slam them. You know, then somebody come out with an official story and do it. Because truth is, whether this is right or wrong or shouldn't be the case, a growing number of people in the United States believe that they're not being told the truth about 9/11. A smaller but also growing number believe that 9/11 was an inside job. And a huge number, by some estimates over 50%, of people around the world, especially in the rest of the Western world, believe that 9/11 was an inside job. People in Europe, actually a majority of people in Europe actually believe that the 9/11 story is untrue.
For good reason.
And if that's wrong, I just want to know why.
So on the 2 airports that they claim were the Newark and Boston airports, they claimed that they lacked closed circuit surveillance.
Okay.
On September 13th, the FBI agent Shaliro said in an interview that he examined footage from dozens of cameras at all 3 airports. Directly contradicts each other. So the FBI has admitted that they have these photos, yet none have been released.
Or admitted or claimed.
Yes.
That they have these photos.
Yeah, they basically say they don't exist. What are they hiding? The only thing... I mean, is there really any national security reasons? I've heard that cited for a lot of these, like, well, it's a national security measure, you know, they can't release that.
The damage was done.
Yeah.
The damage is already done. I don't see a national security risk from a dead man.
Yep. It would be like having a court case and saying, well, we can't submit this as evidence because, after somebody gets murdered or something like that, like we don't want to see people see the dead body.
It could put that person in danger.
Yeah. So where were these hijackers if they were supposedly on the flights?
Mm-hmm.
Where's all the evidence for them?
So, okay, so I'm wondering, because the thing that I run into a lot with this, Ed, is I'm wondering, and I know you don't have every answer, nobody has every answer, but, so, I mean, if your answer is I don't know, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know everything about every detail.
Right. So,
I'll admit when I do.
Who exactly are we accusing when we say that the story isn't fake? Did Bush and Cheney know?
Probably.
Okay.
At least Cheney.
I always like to say Bush Cheney because there's so many people that's always being kicked around that Bush wasn't really calling the shots. And that's a separate issue. It's a separate, almost mini conspiracy in and of itself that George Bush wasn't really calling the shots. Not one that I necessarily buy into, but that's why I say Bush Cheney, because some people are going to go, in that direction.
I don't think that it's necessarily everybody in the government was in on this. In fact, there probably were just a few key figures, along with some other things put in place that not a lot of people would have actually have had to have known. Mm-hmm. It's very likely that they both knew, especially Cheney, but that you're kind of getting into the conspiracy realm, I guess, of who knew what. I guess maybe I'd save that for a little bit later.
Okay.
But yeah. The other thing is, wouldn't we have a lot of audio from this? Now, supposedly, several of the black boxes were destroyed. These highly indestructible, basically created to withstand
a
crashes.
Mechanism created for nothing other than withstanding disaster.
Yes. No audio has been released from that. The only supposed audio comes from the basically from the air traffic control center when they supposedly accidentally hit the switch and praised Allah or something like that. I forget the exact quote. And both the flights basically had a very similar thing that they accidentally let through. And that was the only audio that came through to them. So the other audio would have to have been, whatever's going on in the cockpit, maybe the rumbling beforehand of them, breaking into the cockpit and all the way up to the crash. There are a couple black boxes that still exist, so the data is out there. It just hasn't been released.
Are you talking about the audio from like inside the cockpit? Like
yes.
you're talking about persistent audio from inside the cockpit?
Yes, because the black box consistently records that. So, you have a flight, it goes up, it crashes somewhere. You can basically get the audio of whatever was going on there for the entirety of the flight.
Unless the black box was destroyed.
Yes,
okay.
That's correct. So I guess my question is, why should we believe that these 19 hijackers are the ones who actually took over this plane when, from my perspective, we really don't have any evidence that it was them?
It's a good question. No, you're providing us with good stuff here. You really are. Okay, the reason I asked the question about Bush Cheney, the reason I ask that is because I often think, you guys know that, when it comes to conspiracies, that I'm on board with a lot of them. I'm not on board with some of them. I hem and haw on some, but I'm kind of an Illuminati guy, though, right? I'm kind of somebody that believes that the powers that be aren't really the ones calling the shots or pulling the strings. So that's why I personally have my doubts as to Bush Cheney's involvement. I kind of buy into George Bush's story because the way I view it is that if something fishy was going on that day, I don't necessarily think they were doing it. I kind of tend to think that he was just as surprised as we were, and that there's somebody else or some other group pulling the strings here.
I don't think they're the masterminds, especially George Bush is not the mastermind behind this. I mean, I think a lot of stuff that happened in his administration, he is a puppet. I mean, he is not the brains of the operation. He may or may not be privy to certain parts of it, but I think he's basically doing what he's
Privy
told.
to things that he probably can't control, whether he wanted to or not.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So, if it's not them who's pulling the strings, okay, then we break into the whole Illuminati. That's a different, I guess, a different topic. Why? Why would they do this? Like, what is the purpose of? I'm not saying there isn't one. I'm just, to me, there's a lot of different potential answers to this. But why do this? Why bring these down and blame
What's your
Muslim
end game?
terrorists? Yeah, what is the end game to saying to doing this on purpose? Because the terrorist end game is
Death to America.
Yeah, they're crazy Islamic terrorists, death to America, jihad, 72 virgins, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm totally okay with not buying into that. I am, but why though? What is the end game of the powers that be to doing this?
So, I think if you look at what happened post 9/11, there are three things that you can show that pretty much came about because of this. They would have had a far harder time pulling it off. The war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, and the Patriot Act.
And the Patriot Act, right? Yeah.
Basically, that trifecta right there, you don't have that without 9/11 or something else of its magnitude. I mean, the support for the war wouldn't be there. I mean, we all lived through this. You remember the climate afterwards. Like, if you weren't like rah super patriotic, I mean, it was like everybody was like you. It was not a climate where you could question things. If we were having this same conversation on September 12th,
16 years ago,
no, you could not have that.
No, and the thing is, I was one of those people. I was ready to go to war with whoever did this to us, But there's some truth that the Patriot Act is one for sure. The wars, the military-industrial complex. Ed, are you familiar at all with the speech that Donald Rumsfeld gave on September 10th?
Possibly.
Okay, September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld goes into the Pentagon, and he gives a speech about how he's uncovered all these things, he's uncovered all the finances, and how our military in the Pentagon is a disaster, and that spending needs to be cut. This is coming from the Secretary of Defense, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
That spending needs to be cut, and that it's just ridiculous that we can't find where trillions of dollars are going. And he actually uses terminology saying that we are already at war. We're at war with the finances that cause this, and that we are being put at a major security risk for not having this. Naturally, after September 11th happens, you're no longer allowed to say we shouldn't spend money on the military.
Yeah, it was suicide for any congressman to basically vote against any of it.
Right.
I've got that speech, Josh, if you want to. It's like only 3 minutes.
Yeah, throw it up. Let's listen to it. It could be interesting.
Declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed.
Sorry, it's not.
And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, consider the case of one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
We know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on.
Jim Minery, a former Marine turned whistleblower, is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense agency's balance sheets. Minery tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the country looking for records.
The director looked at me and he says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, you know. My supervisor asked me why I care about doing a good job. So.
He was reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem by just writing it off.
They got to cover it up. That's where the corruption comes in. They got to cover up the fact that they can't do the job.
The Pentagon's Inspector General partially substantiated several of Minery's allegations, but could not prove officials tried to manipulate the financial statements. 20 years ago, Pentagon employee Franklin C. Spinney made headlines exposing what he calls the accounting games. He's still there, and although he does not speak for the Pentagon, he believes the problem has gotten worse.
Those numbers are pie in the sky. The books are cooked routinely year after year after year.
Retired Vice Admiral Jack Shanahan commanded the Navy's Second Fleet the first time Donald Rumsfeld served as Defense Secretary.
With good financial oversight, we could find $48 billion in loose change in that building without having to hit the taxpayer.
In the 2.5 minutes since this report began, the Pentagon has spent nearly $2 million, and it may never know where 25% of those tax dollars went. In Los Angeles, I'm Vince Gonzalez for Eye on America.
Interesting. Interesting stuff. Side note, did you guys know, historically speaking, that Donald Rumsfeld is both the youngest and oldest man ever appointed Secretary of Defense?
I didn't. I knew.
Yes.
I knew that he served twice.
Yeah, when he was in there in the Ford administration, he was the youngest man ever appointed to that position, and when George W. Bush appointed him, he was the oldest man ever appointed to that position.
Conspiracy, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Fun stuff. Fun facts to know and share here on the XCast.
But Josh is dropping knowledge down on people.
Knowledge, bitches, knowledge. No, but it's interesting to me, though, that this was going down. You know? And I do kind of feel like, is Donald Rumsfeld in all this? I mean, the guy not...
Probably.
Yeah,
he was conspicuously absent during the events.
Well, but he wasn't
for part of it.
But
he disappeared.
I wonder, is Donald Rumsfeld like your secret anti-hero here? Is Donald Rumsfeld the guy that we all hate because the media made us hate him? But was he really trying to be the good guy? Is he the whistleblower in all of this? I often wonder about that, some of that stuff. Some of the people that you think are, they're the ones in on the conspiracy, are some of these people often the people that didn't know, that were, trying to do the right thing and then are thrust into this whole problem,
So one reason why I would have a hard time thinking that anybody in the administration was a whistleblower sort of hero is no one lost their job over this. So not only were there no scapegoats, no, this guy screwed up, I'm getting rid of him, heads are going to roll. But also nobody got fired who would potentially, if they were leaking, maybe they would want to blow them out sort of thing. Several of those people got promoted. I doubt you would promote people or, if they're potentially going to be an enemy of yours.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's just, Rumsfeld had kind of nowhere to go if you, sometimes if you get thrust into the middle of a big time conspiracy, you kind of have to
Yeah,
hold
if
your
you,
ground.
yeah, if you don't, you're in the middle of it. You got a family. You don't want to die or have them die, sort of thing. You maybe
I mean, this
you go
isn't me
along.
trying to start the Down for Himself fan club or anything. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I wonder that sometimes when I hear this stuff or hear particular things like this. Ed, you mentioned the Patriot Act.
Yep.
You mentioned going to war. Why do you want to go to war with the support of the people? Well, that's kind of an easy one, right? You want to go to war because war can be financially beneficial, right?
Yeah. Well, to people with the money, not
Right.
necessarily
To the people pulling the strings. Yeah. That war kind of keeps the thing going. This is what President Eisenhower warned us of, the industrial military complex. Jumping in, it can't function properly without a war, without some sort of strife, something going on. I guess if you tried to hide anything nefarious, tried to sugarcoat it, you would say that this is a necessary evil that can't function without a purpose, right? You would say that we need this car. We need this car, and the car can't run if you don't start it every day and drive it around the block. I guess is kind of like if you're really trying to sugarcoat it and make it sound like it's not bad or nefarious. You'd say that, hey, you got to run around the block, or if it won't start when you need it. I don't need it all the time, but you need to keep running, and that's the military in essence. And this is what General Eisenhower, later President Eisenhower, warned us of. So that one makes sense to me, to some degree. I don't know that there's really a bunch of terrible people that want us to be at war all the time, but maybe there is. Maybe there is. The Patriot Act, though, this is, to me, is the one that's much more interesting. Because it does seem as though when these things happen, when these tragedies happen, that people will willingly give up their rights to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. And there's definitely something to be said about that, I mean, we've shown that.
What's that Benjamin Franklin quote? Something along the lines of "Those who would give up their rights don't deserve to have them."
Yeah, any person who would give up liberty in the name of security deserves neither liberty nor security.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's very true. I mean, it's something that I personally agree with. As a lover of liberty, and the United States of America as a nation has been very pro-liberty over the years. Think about when we were kids. We're all in our 30s here on this show. Think about when we were kids. You would do something, and what was a common response back then was, hey, it's a free country.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a free country, right? You don't hear people say that anymore. You don't hear kids say it. You don't hear adults say it. You don't hear anybody say that anymore. No one says, hey, it's a free country. But back then, people had a respect for freedom. Now, it seems as though people do not have a respect for freedom. People are more than willing to give up their freedom, to give up their liberty, to make sure that 9/11 doesn't happen again. Yeah. That something bad doesn't happen again. And that's the part of it that I just kind of don't buy. Is that if this were a conspiracy, then to me the reason would be that they need reasons, they need drastic measures to show people that liberty that you think you love, that liberty that you think you like, that liberty that you think you want or crave, no, you don't really want that. It's not important, it's not necessary, and it's detrimental to you and your fellow American that you love so much. Those people that died in those trade towers, those heroes that saved them, they weren't protected by liberty. They were protected by government. They're protected by the powers that be that control everything around you. You picking up what I'm throwing down at all, Ed? Is this...
Yeah. Well, look what happened. Essentially, you created this boogeyman bad guy. This, okay, so we say it's, there's all these terrorists out there who hate us for our freedoms and want us dead. Who exactly are they? They're kind of vaguely defined, and we're just constantly at war with them. It's like this, it's something that's used just perpetually to, to that end, essentially use it to reduce your rights and continue this war. And basically, it's being used against the American people.
No, and this is a question I've always asked, in the past, and this makes it I'm oversimplifying it here when I say this. I do acknowledge that I'm oversimplifying it, but if we have these really nasty terrorists out there that just want to blow us up, they want to, death to America, they want to destroy us, and we as Americans favor and love liberty. We also want to keep our people safe. Why do we tolerate their existence? And I know that sounds like, oh, well, you're just being like Bush and Cheney. You just want to go to war with them. Like, no, I don't want to go to war with them. I actually want to win that war with them. I actually want to show them that, like, no, we're not gonna fight you. We're gonna destroy you. If you are living in your home and you have this one neighbor that just every day is telling you, hey, tomorrow I'm going to kill your kids. I think tomorrow's the day I'm going to kill your kids. If I don't do it tomorrow, I'm definitely going to do it next week. And if I don't do it next week, then I'm going to get a whole bunch of people together. And next month, I'm really going to kill you. I'm going to big time kill you. Don't you do something about it? Preemptively? Don't you say, no, I'm not going to tolerate the existence of this person that wants to murder me and my kids. But you're not going to say, like, okay, I'm going to start a battle with you. No, you're going to actually do something about it that ends it. Especially if you have the means to destroy it. But if you kill your neighbor, you don't have an excuse to continue fighting and killing all your other neighbors. Exactly. So, Adam, I want to get your opinion on some of this stuff, because we've talked to Ed a lot, and he's got some really good info here and some really good opinions. But are you laying down, and are you picking up any of the stuff that's being laid down here, or you think it's nonsense? I mean, it's okay if you do. I just, because I'm not trying to take either side here necessarily, but do you think that's true when I was saying that people are more than willing to give up their liberty after something tragic happens?
I think the problem that people have is within themselves. I think fear can be one of the biggest detriments to liberty that one can see, and I think that a lot of the times is government responsible for spreading fear sometimes, of course. Are people responsible for spreading fear sometimes, of course. Fear is the path to the dark side. Exactly. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. I'm glad we got the Star Wars reference in.
Thanks, Yoda.
Yeah, it's always important to make sure you get the Star Wars reference. Which I would mention something about J.J. Abrams, but I don't want to get Josh Goff on.
We're talking about Star Wars here.
Yeah, we're talking. I don't know if you heard the terrible news that J.J. Abrams will be directing Episode 9.
Oh, really?
Yes. So
he couldn't.
So the franchise is doomed.
Well, it was, but it's just official now.
It is official.
That last thread of hope you had just disappeared.
So
there's going to be a Star Wars about J.J. Abrams, just like a separate one, like a metaphorical one that they're going to be writing afterwards.
It was called The Phantom Menace. He was Darth Maul.
Does this mean Episode 8 is actually going to be good, and he saw it and was like, no.
I can't have that.
Yeah.
I'll fix that. Don't worry.
Ultimately, though, Josh, I think that there's a lot of stretching when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Ed, God bless you. I think that obviously you know your shit when it comes to this sort of thing. Obviously, I mean, Ed came into the studio tonight with just notes upon notes of this.
Well, I got many pages to go too,
and I can certainly appreciate, somebody wanting to get down, to the bottom of something. And obviously, September 11th was something that was extremely, extremely important in our country's history. It was a horrific event. But I do think that people like to stretch a lot of certain aspects of it. Take, for instance, the picture thing. I think that the picture thing is a huge stretch. And I'm not saying that we were completely told 100% the truth on all of this. I think there are a lot of holes everywhere. I think one of the most egregious things to come out of September 11th was just how ill-prepared the government actually was to handle this sort of thing.
The official story, the incompetence theory, as it's often called.
I didn't know. See, Ed would be one to know all the different conspiracy and their names and everything to it.
That was a recurring theme for Bill Cooper as well. That this idea that you can constantly write it off as government, that government is stupid.
Well, you know what,
Their
Josh?
leaders are dumb. This actually goes back even longer before Bill Cooper. This goes back to Mark Twain.
Yeah, exactly.
Josh, I'm not. You know what though? I'm not even saying that. I'm not saying that the government was stupid. I'm saying that the government was irresponsible, because I certainly believe that the government knew that something was going to happen.
The CIA had reports, a lot of reports beforehand.
And you know what? I don't deny something like that was to happen. And I certainly believe that the government knew that the CIA had reports that something of September 11th's magnitude could in fact happen here on American soil. And we remember how it was, back prior to September 11th when, as far as airport security goes. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure you can remember, going through security without having a boarding pass.
Yeah.
And just going right up to the gate.
Yes.
And, really hardly even being, screened at all.
The last time I flew prior to September 11th was about a year before. And obviously things have tightened up since then. I think that's actually part of the illusion that it's kind of there to make people feel more safe. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like you stroll in. They still have security cameras. There are still security guards there. That's obviously a lot more lax.
Yeah.
That's one thing that's changed, but it wasn't like there was no security at all.
No, you're absolutely right. It's yes. I'm not saying that you could just, waltz right up to the gate or just go right up there, right to the desk and purchase a ticket and just walk up to the plane and get on it. I mean, I'm not saying that was the case. What I am saying though is like I said, I do certainly believe that the CIA had knowledge that something of a tremendous catastrophic magnitude could happen. And that's the most egregious thing about it was the government knowing that something like this was going to happen. And like I said, this isn't even incompetence. This is just just being totally irresponsible with the information that you're given, not acting on it, not taking the proper precautions to make sure that something like this didn't happen. And then you go and see that, and I know this is going to fuel some of the other conspiracy theories out there regarding NORAD not acting and NORAD not other adequate planes to go up there and shoot these airliners down. And perhaps that was one of the other theories out there, was that they didn't want to. They wanted NORAD to be, ill-equipped to handle this, just so it could go through. But I mean, like I said, I don't believe that aspect of it. I just believe that there was an irresponsible approach to this, whereas the United States, NORAD, whatever, was just so ill-prepared, despite the information given to them and them knowing about that, it just, no pun intended, blew up in their faces.
Okay, so say what I brought up so far, the hijackers, they boarded the planes, they piloted them despite their pretty much incompetence at flying, and drove them directly into their targets as planned. Mm-hmm. So we take that, and it's just, for whatever reason, the government just, they don't really, they've got more important things, so they're not going to bother pasting a couple photos, which would be super easy to do. There are a lot of other aspects of that day that just do not add up. That point to more than just incompetence or gross negligence. At some point, you go on the spectrum, you pass the gross negligence and start to think that could only happen if somebody wanted that to happen.
But even the plane thing, I think that when it comes to that, they didn't have to do like a whole lot. I mean, they didn't have to take off the plane. They didn't have to land the plane. The only thing that they had to do was sit there and steer it into a building.
As easy as that might sound from people who have watched movies. So let's see if I can find the actual quote. There was a pilot who had actually flown two of the planes that were flown into the buildings. I think it was the two World Trade Center ones. I don't have that in front of me at the moment. Who basically said those maneuvers were impossible. Actually, in regards to the flights themselves, so a couple things about them.
But would we hear more coming out about this? I mean, would we hear?
Well, if you're looking for it, you will.
I mean, what I'm saying is there's thousands of pilots.
Yes.
Hundreds of thousands of pilots, maybe, in the world.
Yes.
There's countless numbers of pilots in the United States. I mean, how many of those pilots have actually come forth and said?
Quite a few. They've made an organization.
Look. I guess my point is there's so many pilots out there that you may go ahead and get the ones that want to raise these questions and these conspiracies about it.
Well, okay, so another thing about the flights that day, so they basically knew the speeds and the times that they have them tracked. You can recreate it. You can say the flight was at 8:59. This is where it was at. This is the speed it was traveling. The traveled at speeds, basically, depending on which of the four flights you're talking about, from 490 miles an hour to 586 miles an hour, which, especially at the altitude, because you basically have more wind resistance the closer you are to the ground, which was far in excess of what those planes could actually do. As in, it's impossible if you don't want a fin or a wing to actually rip off to fly at that speed. So one of the pilots who actually flew two of those flights, not like those types of planes, but he actually was on the two of those exact planes. His name is Russ Wittenberg. He says that it isn't possible to train in a 172, I think that was the Cessna, and fly a 757 or a 767, fly it at speeds that exceed its design limits, and that those two aircrafts couldn't do it, and that he couldn't do it. So you have this guy who is basically pilot flying these planes his entire life, saying that he couldn't do it, but we're supposed to suspend belief and say that these hijackers who basically had a summer internship on Cessnas could, in the moment, figure out how to fly this and aim it perfectly into a building. Also, flying it basically faster than any experienced pilot could pilot it and break the laws of physics at the same time.
One question I would ask, because I want to break into another thing too, with the idea that there being potential explosives in the buildings. But before that, and I just, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Adam, but would you rule out the idea that, because let's stick with Ed's
we're getting a call in, Jeff.
Oh, we're getting a call. This should be... welcome. You are on theempiremedia.com on the XCast for Deep Issues. Is this Kyle?
What's up, brothers?
Kyle, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good.
I'm so glad you could make it. I know that you got a lot going on.
I'm so late. I left the phone in the car, having a good time with my sister. He's up from the hurricane, and we're taking advantage of her being here and just having a good time.
That's great. No, I know you had family who got out safe from the hurricane, and that's awesome. We're good to hear from you. And I know you're busy tonight, Kyle. We don't want to keep you. We're not going to keep you long. I do really appreciate you calling, and we'd love to have you in the studio for these.
I'll be back. Don't worry. Timing been ugly lately, but we'll get back into it.
Right. But this is, for those of you listening, this is Kyle Puska, one of our other Deep Issues experts, and we especially wanted him on this show because he is an expert in science and metallurgy. And this is something that we definitely want to talk with you about, Kyle. So, I just want to, Kyle, if at any point if there's something you want to say, please feel free to just break off and say it.
Oh, you know me. I'll charge in when necessary.
Yeah. But I'll just throw out the basic question: can jet fuel melt steel beams?
Jet fuel. Well, let's just talk about steel, right?
Okay.
So it's a structural steel, and so it's probably hardened about 1,800, maybe up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And that's how they harden it. And then what they usually do is then after a hardening thing, they'll temper it, which means it's another thermal process. They apply whatever they're trying to, create a new mechanical property in the material, and then they'll temper it at another temperature. And sometimes this can be like 3 and 4, maybe 5 and 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay.
Okay.
So structural steel is probably in the range anywhere from 5 up to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So what that means is if that material heats up beyond that temperature, then what happens is the atoms start to move and soften and, start to slide across each other. And then all of a sudden you get material deformation and, then plastic deformation, which is just complete catastrophic failure. And it's pretty possible when, a jet hits the building like that, the energy associated with that kind of explosion, the gas would ignite, and the fuel, because there's such a high payload of fuel there, would soak all of it and keep the fire brewing. And that's just longer that the heat transfers into all the steel components. So quite frankly, what happened is it softened it, in my opinion. And, when you soften it down to a certain point, it's like, once that first domino hits, it's done. The energy from up above is so great, and it was, towards the top of the middle, and there's too much mass above it that really, accelerated, that failure rate. So, the heat caused the failure. Did it melt? No, but it softened.
You see, that's science talking, you guys. That's science.
No, that is, and that's exactly why we wanted you in on this discussion, Kyle. And
but what about I'm assuming too, the force of these planes going into these buildings.
Oh yeah.
Any fire, protection that these steel beams had were probably just annihilated.
Again, it's all about the transfer energy. When you have something traveling that fast, the energy's got to dissipate to something, right? And so that energy just rides right into all the materials that it's have contact with. And you're literally getting, electronic and atomic jumps from one material to another during, because it's dissipating energy at such a high rate. in that exchange. And yeah, and that causes also deformation. That's why you see shit blow up. That's just shit, transferring to a different form. So kind of cool.
So Kyle, I got a question for you. What about the fireproofing on all of the trusses?
The fireproofing, and basically what that would possibly do is that's going to give kind of like, what's the right term? It's going to provide protection up to a certain point, meaning that it might be rated to like 600 degrees. And what that means, it's just like kind of a fire retardant, meaning it won't ignite for a certain amount of, till it exceeds 600 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's thin, and once it burns off, there's no protection beyond that. You're down to where it was. So it's kind of like a pseudo covering, if you will.
And that's what I'm saying. Like the planes, the impact too could have wiped some of this away as well. I mean,
oh yeah, the impact again. Any kind of coating on anything, that interface is weak, and if it sees extreme energy transfer, it's going to delaminate right at that interface.
Not to mention,
and yeah,
I'm sorry,
and that coating would come right off, and then things are vulnerable at that point because the coatings are usually there for a very important reason, for protection. And once they're gone, I mean, in the cutting tool industry, there's coatings on tools that are machining gears dry in like 5 seconds, but that coating is compromised, that whole tool and possible machine blows up in like 2 seconds.
Not to mention, to mention,
coating's big difference.
Yeah, I was going to say, not to mention too. I mean, the World Trade Center. I mean, there was probably never testing, or let alone testing at all for a jumbo jet.
Actually, a 707. It was designed to.
Well, you know what? Ironically enough, prior to 9/11, you're right. But after that time, yeah, that's absolutely become part of the design. And it's to minimize damage when some type of event occurs. Now, that's all about again energy transfer momentum, and they're building devices that can dissipate energy and not destroy shit. So that's there's a lot of technology evolves from a tragic event like that, always, and that's kind of a good thing.
Kyle, I don't want to put you on the spot here too much because we did not plan these questions ahead of time, and I don't want to put you on the spot if this is something out of your wheelhouse, and if it is, don't worry about it. Just say I don't know. But what is thermite? Are you familiar with this at all?
What is it again?
Thermite.
Thermite?
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, the thermite reaction.
Yes, there's a lot of talk. I'll be honest with you, I don't understand this stuff, and there's a lot of talk about thermite mixed with sulfur.
All right, guys, you guys are quite lucky because once upon a job there, I actually did thermite reactions for my living, meaning we light off thermite reactions every day just to separate metal from slag. So yeah, here's the gig on the thermite reaction, and this could be very possible too. Is if you have any type of oxide, let's say you have a metal oxide of iron oxide or like a vanadium oxide, which I used to play around with, it really doesn't matter. Some metallic element with an oxide is what, one, element of the equation here. And then what you do is you put into a raw or pure virgin state. In this case, you want to put fine alumina. Okay, so guess what's a lot of airplanes made out of? Yeah, there's a lot of aluminum in that. So imagine the shards, once you dissipate, release the aluminum atoms on, upon impact, they become part of this reaction. And what happens is anything that's oxidized, the aluminum will exchange with whatever because the affinity for oxygen to aluminum is so great that the oxygen will naturally, detach from whatever it's on and go to the aluminum. And they utilize this phenomenon, to separate metals, in nature. And that's how you get, you have the famous slag. Well, slags are not metal. They're usually oxides. They're great insulators. And then when they form, there's usually pure metal underneath. And that's what I did my job. But the whole point is this reaction, just to give you some point of reference, we would take 1,200 pounds of room temperature powder, and we would put it on this steel plate, 4 inches thick, put a steel ring around it, 4 inches thick, and then we would make the aluminum oxide, which is a great insulator. We would line the whole side of that the iron ring with that. We pour in that 1,300 pounds of powder into that vessel. We would take pure aluminum powder, finer powder, take literally a newspaper, twist it up like, you're going to create a bomb. We take our old Bic out, and we light her up, and then we put it into a bunker where the bunker is made out of 8x8 cylinder blocks. Imagine that. The whole thing is each rebar in each one of the holes and then filled with concrete and all the rebar. That construction was the door as well. and it was connected to a bag house. So our operator would go in there, would set it down, take the paper with aluminum, light it, throw it over his shoulder into the into the vessel, close the door, which was like 10 feet tall, and walk away. And then 20 seconds later, all hell broke loose. That reaction just is so exothermic that basically it felt like the air sucked out of the room. And once it did that, you got a burst of, all kinds of sparks and fire coming out under the door shaking like crazy. The back house was barely keeping up with all the dust. And then these operators had to go in and pick that up, to make sure that they could get the good metal separation, to get it, because that was based on yield. And, that was part of my job to maximize that. We basically screwed around making bombs. Kind of fun.
Very cool. Very
but
cool.
that's thermite.
Kyle, because there's a guy, Paolo Marini, who is a metallurgy expert, Italian guy from the Italian Center for Materials Development, and he said that there were microscopic trace levels of thermite and sulfur present when they analyzed the wreckage from 9/11, from the trade towers. And is that something that would occur naturally, perhaps, from planes, or is that something that could be planted?
No, again, if things oxidize and under the right conditions, you get pure aluminum. Again, imagine aluminum fragmenting into, smaller elements, and just a concentration of those would, kind of get around something and it become reactive. And, that's the whole point. When you break shit up, it becomes more reactive. And, that's in an event like that. Yeah, I think it's just kind of a byproduct of what went down,
Okay.
So, I just got a question, not to put you on the spot, but what if I told you there was a thermographic camera filming the Twin Towers, and on that camera it showed that the temperature never went over 212 degrees Fahrenheit?
Well, never went over what, 212 you said?
212.
The steel components did not?
The entire building, nowhere in the building. Not only that,
nowhere in the building.
So it hit.
I would find that extremely hard to believe.
There were also 16 people who. So that hit, and a lot of that structure that's holding it up is in the center, kind of where all the stairways are, on the 94th to 98th floor. There were 16 people who, as you said, that temperature's got to get up there pretty hot, who basically walked through that area with not as much as a single burn, and didn't get melted when they walked through that and escaped the building.
Yeah, I don't know. Weird things happen. What we don't know is what was in the contents of some of those floors. The construction of the floor. Could it have been a natural barrier? Who knows? I find it hard to believe in an event like that. The energy can be tremendous. Your mountain metal here, that's 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, at the core. How far that dissipates out, that's certainly a question of debate. But, there was certainly, excessive temperatures in an event like that with all that fuel burning. Absolutely. And just the transfer energy alone.
When it collapsed, why didn't it just collapse down to, say, the, 80th
Well, it took a while.
So?
It took a while. Again, this was a thermal event. And, as I stated earlier, what needed to happen is the main supporting beams needed to soften under the weight of the mass, what was left on the top. There's just that balance beam going on, and it took, the time for the things to heat up. Heat transfer, there's laws, and you could have calculated how long it would have took, before it softened to a point where it was going to collapse. And, so I think that there was that delay.
Huh. Kyle, do you buy into the claims that the building, like it is when you have a planned implosion, that the building would have needed to be weakened to have this kind of implosion take place?
No, not really.
Okay.
I'm certainly no demolition expert, but my gut instinct does now.
Okay. No, that is that's good to know. Because Kyle, I've seen other people like you who are much smarter than me try to sell me on this on both ways. I've seen people out there saying they're like, "Oh, jet fuel can't melt steel beams. Watch this," and they do a little science experiment and they burn it down. And then I've heard other people say that no, that's impossible. So it's good to hear an expert like you talking about how certain aspects of this could be possible. So I'm on board, because I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm clueless. In fact, the stuff you just said was fascinating to me, but if I told you I understood it all, I'd be lying. I'm not. My brain doesn't work that way.
We'll have another conversation again soon, Josh, in my screen house.
Sounds good, Kyle.
Oh wait, that's Brendaland. I forgot to mention.
Yeah, Kyle, if there's anything else, we are not cutting you off here, but I know you are short on time. Is there anything else you want to add on the greater 9/11 conspiracy aspect here, or 9/11 anything?
The irony is, where we're at today, in this, wherever we're at today, I think, the whole. I hate to admit it, but 9/11. Obviously, I'm kind of a believer things happen for a reason, and I think it transforms who we are as people. Back then, we had a lot of good moments, but now I think we're being a little bit more challenged, and what our core beliefs are, and our expression of it. And I think people need to get involved. That's why it's good to have things like this that people can talk about it, because we need to, because shit's going down kind of crazy,
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's my closing thoughts.
Adam, Ed, anything else? Kyle, I know, has to go. He's busy with family, and that's very important. Anything else you want to ask Kyle real quick?
No, I think we let him get back to his...
Yeah, nothing that wouldn't take a while.
All right, guys. I appreciate the time, and I'll be back in there soon.
Hope so, Kyle. So good to hear from you, buddy. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, take care, guys. Thanks.
You too. See ya. All right, it's Kyle Puska, everybody. Metallurgist, scientist, and all-around stuff expert.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, so...
He had some good info there.
No, he does.
Ed.
What? I don't think that's disputing anything Kyle said.
That was science, son.
Actually, I do have some coming from the National Institute of Standards and Technology themselves.
You know what? Unplug his Ethernet cable.
You're the producer, man. So I don't know how to work things like electrical
so
cords.
They did the investigation on the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings, and during that, they said that dislodging the fireproofing of the trusses would be absolutely necessary for the collapse. Essentially, that they would have had to have weakened when the trusses weakened and they gave out. So basically, the way the World Trade Center is built is you have essentially these gigantic steel beams on the perimeter that accounts for like 40% of the strength. Then you have the entire center where all the elevators and heating and cooling and all that go through. That accounts for 60%. And then you have this gigantic open floor plan. So you have this big truss that essentially connects the two.
Which, by the way, we should mention that we pointed out Kyle's expertise in this, but Ed used to engineer trusses for a living.
Yeah, so I'm the complete stranger to any of these ideas. But so they said essentially that because there's fireproofing all over these trusses, and the only way for them to heat up that high is if it got dislodged. Okay, so a gigantic plane flies in and just blows it all off. Some evidence against that. So it hit the 94th to 98th floor, that kind of 5-floor span. There was a guy who was on the 91st floor, so almost as close as you can get without being a part of it. When it hit, he was sitting at his desk. Nothing so much as fell over on his desk or even shook. But we're supposed to believe that just a couple floors higher, just everything is going to hell and blowing off. On top of that, as Kyle mentioned, basically the trusses need to be over 480 degrees in order to weaken to where they would start stretching. The NIST also claims that they reached over 1,800 degrees of temperatures, although they won't release their models of how they came to these conclusions. But there are thermographic cameras showing basically the World Trade Centers, and it doesn't go above 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not enough to, by anybody's claims, melt these steel beams. And I guess I was going to lead up to this and go and kind of with it, but if we're going into kind of demolition versus collapse theory.
Sure, yeah, jump into it. No, I got some stuff on that too, so please jump into it.
Okay, so not only does NIST not have any evidence to support their own model, basically just there's no proof of the sagging truss theory. There's other things that it breaks, like Newton's third law of motion. So you have roughly 15 or so floors that are collapsing. If you ever just YouTube building collapses, not demolitions, collapses, because that's really because they claim it was collapsed, and the conspiracy theory is that it was a controlled demolition. If you have a building collapse, it is generally a partial collapse. If you have 15 floors collapse below it, it's probably going to crush roughly about 15 floors. That energy moving downward is basically going against what is below it, which is basically pushing against it, and it's not just going to continuously pancake all the way down. There's not enough energy to get it to go down that far. What we see is different, though. You actually see the building collapse all the way to the base. On top of that, it's at a free fall speed, which means it met zero resistance on the way down. Not exactly, but within a second or two of free fall speed. If the pancake theory is
very similar to what happens in a planned demolition. A planned implosion and demolition.
Exactly. If you look at planned demolitions, you can time them. They are free fall speeds. The official time of how long it took for it to collapse is a free fall speed.
So you think that there was a demolition around it?
Yes, because it's physically impossible otherwise.
Other explosives present.
Yes, there were. So, first responders, there are over 100 first responders basically noted in all of their reports of hearing loud booms. Both, and not only that, but they started before the first plane hit the tower.
And these are documented even in mainstream media.
And you can, the mainstream media doesn't usually show these clips, but you can easily see just random people being interviewed on the street, and you hear booms in the background. Mm-hmm. It's not like they're being made up. Where are these coming from?
No, there was a member of one of the top demolition firms in the country who was saying that this does seem exactly like a planned implosion or a planned demolition. And he had come out and said that what needed to be done to do this, if you're going to do some sort of planned implosion like this on a large building, is that you first need to break apart, in some ways, the staircases to affect the structural integrity, and that usually the elevator shafts have to be affected as well. Now, one thing we do know for sure is that for 9 months prior to 9/11, you had elevator modernization going on in the trade towers. Elevators were shut down, security access was granted to these elevator firms, elevators were shut down, and they were supposedly being modernized for the future, but some people believe that things were being put in place to, bring about an inevitable implosion that would happen, that would be necessary once the catalyst came about. Strange.
You could get to those core columns that held it up in the elevator. Also,
one of the people that sat on the board for the elevator modernization company was one Marvin Bush, brother of George W. Bush.
The weekend also before 9/11, so the 8th and the 9th, they had an unprecedented power outage where the entire building lost power, even the secured areas. And quite literally, people were walking into secured areas without any access whatsoever, no footage, no power, no anything. Anything could have been going on. So, everybody thinking, how could they possibly get these explosives into the building? How would they get past bomb sniffing dogs and the like? Well, you've basically got months of access to the structure that you need, and plenty of time to get past cameras, too.
I have always said, now this has nothing to do with this particular conspiracy per se, But I've always said that no matter what the security thing, whatever the security protocol is that, and this comes from somebody that I have a long history of working construction. If you walk in someplace wearing a tool bag and a smile, anyone will let you in anywhere. Anybody. Doesn't matter what it is. You got a leather tool bag on, you put on a smile, you got a hammer and a tape measure, they will let you in anywhere. And this is just something I noticed over the years. You know? Working on schools and government buildings and things like that they don't seem to really care. You know, like, oh, well, guy's working. Dude's working. And it's just, that is just a personal observation of mine. Nothing, it doesn't link directly to any conspiracy here or elsewhere.
They would likely have to do something like that, just
right?
To get it past people. Also, a controlled demolition rather than a collapse. If it were a collapse, how do you explain the squibs, which are basically the chunks that are shooting out? So it's not just like the windows, as it's coming crashing down, obviously all the windows are going to crash, but there are gigantic chunks being shot out, like big piles of steel and bodies. And if it's just the building crashing on top of itself, these are coming from many floors below. We're talking like a dozen or more floors below where it's just shooting out. How would that happen?
You're talking about as the building is coming down?
Yes. That does not happen on a collapse, but it does happen on a controlled demolition. Also, just the sheer amount of energy. How do 15 floors crush, 90-something floors of a building? On top of that, you also see the antenna start to come down first. Wouldn't the top chunk of the building come down, hit the other portion from where it gave out? Probably. Like, if you look at building collapses, there are plenty of them out there. The entire building doesn't come to a smoldering pile of nothing. There's a big chunk of the building.
But have we ever seen a building taken down by an airplane, and a building that is as big as the World Trade Centers were? I mean, that in and of itself was unprecedented, and until it actually happened.
No, but just because it's the World Trade Center doesn't mean it can defy physics. I mean, the amount of weight and energy that is in that 15 floors of the building isn't enough to continuously make it topple down into a smoldering pile, which, by the way, was it at the actual building.
But did it go down perfectly? I mean,
nearly.
Because
pretty close. Actually.
I mean, because when I saw it, I saw stuff, toppling over, and I mean, when the first bombing happened in 1993, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed like they tried to get it to topple over, like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't happen. The only thing that happened was, the car bomb went off in the parking garage and caused some damage, but obviously nothing nearly as bad as what they wanted it to. But from what I can remember, a building, the World Trade Center building coming down, and the footprint that it caused was pretty big. It seemed like. I mean, it wasn't like it was one of those controlled demolitions where it, was very, very contained. I mean, from what I saw, I mean, this is just. I mean, obviously, I don't think you're not going to agree with this, but from what I remember seeing, and we've all watched it, more times than we probably want to, but from what I can remember, it was a pretty messy collapse.
It was, and they do seem to kind of come straight down to some degree. And one of the claims I've heard is that if it was, again, we're just talking basic physics here, and I'm not even expert on basic physics, let alone, real physics or good physics or intense physics or advanced physics. But one of the things people claim is that if it was originated with this plane hitting it, then why did it come straight down? Shouldn't it have toppled it to some degree? Now, if the plane had enough force to do that, shouldn't it have kind of toppled to the right or to the left to some degree?
Not once, but twice.
Twice, correct.
Well, another interesting thing is that, and this can be proven in pictures, that prior to any sort of the cleanup, there were 45-degree cuts found in some of the columns that were at the base. There wasn't much left, but some of them were sticking out of the ground. And I know officially they may say, well, we had to cut some of them to get them out, except before any of the cleanup occurred, you can see that there are 45-degree cuts in the columns. Now, oftentimes during a demolition, a crew will go in and cut them, and that's part of how you get a building to essentially implode on itself and not topple over, in addition to weakening it.
Okay, here's a question I have that I've never heard anyone ask. I've never heard the believers in the official story ask this, and I've never heard the conspiracy theorists ask this. But one thing that I've come to wonder in this is that why are people not open to the idea that, say you believe the official story. Mm-hmm. Let's go again with you believe the official story. But why are people not open to the idea that maybe some prep work was done for this beforehand? Okay, so you believe that terrorists took control of some planes and they had a well laid out plan that took these things down. You had these pilots who were soldiers, in essence. These pilots were soldiers, and Osama bin Laden or whomever else is planning, is the mastermind, or you have several masterminds behind this attack. Why is it insane to think that perhaps some prep work was done? Perhaps some bombs were planted. Perhaps some slices were made in certain spots in the trusses or in the steel, or that elevators were sabotaged or staircases were sabotaged to help this along. And that's something that I've never heard anyone speak to, is that maybe it's both.
Both in terms of...
As in, the official story is true, or is semi-true.
That would be the government essentially covering for the terrorists.
Yes, it would be. In a lot of ways, yes, it would be. I don't know why that would be, but it would be. And this is what I'm saying, is that if you believe that terrorists could take control of these planes and crash into the trade towers and make all this happen, then why can't you believe that they did some prep work? That's all I'm asking here at this point.
And I guess I ended up kind of skipping a bunch of it. If we talk about the other two planes, I guess that might lead me into some reasons as to why I would not believe that. Why I think it would actually be the most implausible of the three scenarios.
I want to ask you a question. I've thrown at him a lot, thrown a lot at him tonight. I ask you, Ed, do you believe, again, no right or wrong answer here, but do you believe that there were terrorists who got on these planes and attempted some of this? A lot like like we've discussed, like Oswald being the patsy who truly believed that he was there to kill Kennedy. Do you believe that there were guys that got on these planes and attempted this, or do you believe that it's complete nonsense, that the story's made up?
I think it's complete nonsense. Okay. And the more I look into it, there's almost no evidence to actually support that. So
you do not think that this was even a thing, that these pilots happened? Do you believe there were planes, or no?
On at least two of them, no.
Okay.
Which the parts that can skip past. So the Pentagon flight and the Shanksville, Pennsylvania flight, along with some other evidence, like the cell phone calls, I think essentially sort of disproves that. So take the Pentagon, Flight 77.
Okay. Yeah, we haven't talked quite enough about these things yet, so that's good.
So basically no plane degree. The hole is smaller than the wingspan. There's a 90-foot hole, and the wingspan at the angle that the official story says that it hit is 160 feet. A 160-foot plane does not make a 90-foot hole. The tail or the stabilizers did not hit the building, so if you would expect essentially like a hole resembling like the perimeter, the outline of an airplane, no holes there. Which, if there weren't a hole there, you would expect that it would be on the lawn somewhere behind it. They did not.
The case, though, right?
Nope. They did not retrieve. There was no engine cores. These massive piles of steel that basically survive every plane crash because they're massive piles of steel. There were at least 85 known cameras that would have caught this. I mean, it's the Pentagon. It's our nation's capital. You have cameras everywhere. Not only government cameras, but you have cameras
countermeasures, anything you can think of.
Yeah, I mean, there are local party stores that might have a security camera. Businesses in the area like that would have all have caught this flight coming in. They basically were all confiscated. There's only official footage from two of the cameras, which are basically from the same angle. They basically are like right next to each other that they show, and one which has been proven to be doctored, which is the only frame that would actually show what would look to be maybe like a plane in it. On top of that, with the Pentagon, both World Trade Centers had been hit already. They knew it was coming. As mentioned before, they took it off autopilot. The pilot made a very difficult maneuver where he essentially circled around. He would have lost the Pentagon in his line of sight. This is a guy who basically spent the summer training again, never flown this before, made a dangerous maneuver only to fly it into a recently renovated wall of the Pentagon rather than, if I'm a terrorist, I'm probably dropping this thing on top of it to do maximum damage. Especially if they did enough research as they did to get to this point. They should have known that the corner that basically all the high-ranking officers are at was on the exact opposite side of where they hit, and that if they just plopped it in the center, they had a good chance of taking a lot of people out. Also, like with the other flights, many experienced pilots basically said that they couldn't have made this maneuver. And as I mentioned, the wall that was hit was recently reinforced with steel beams. There was also an NBC reporter or correspondent who basically stated a top-level official told him to stay away from the E-ring after the first two towers were hit. Which the E-ring was then hit, the basic exterior ring of the Pentagon. So, what hit the Pentagon? Why wouldn't they show any pictures of it? Why did the plane not fit in there? Where is the debris?
Adam, don't you have a comment about that? I believe we talked about it a bit off air about I believe it was the Pentagon plane we were talking about where the why the wings were not there or why the hole seemed smaller.
The wings, according to reports and eyewitness reports, is that the wings fell off. The wings were gone by the time it hit the Pentagon. And they did find debris again, according to these reports. I know it's always going to be disputed.
Sure,
but they did find landing gears. They did find pieces of the plane. They found all of that.
Well, and by you saying that it was just kind of like the rocket center of the plane, in essence, hitting and not the wings, that actually is consistent.
The fuselage.
Yes.
Is that the correct terminology?
I believe that is, yes. That is actually consistent with something Ed said a little earlier, that if you tried to put these planes in that position or in...
You would start losing pieces of it.
You'd be losing pieces of said plane.
So I have a question for you, though. Why would these terrorists who are flying these planes in their target, why would they speed them up to 500 plus miles an hour and not just cruise in at 400 miles an hour?
Well, I'm assuming...
For the last 2 minutes or so of their flight.
Again, perhaps they're dumb and they don't know how to fly the planes.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
That is kind of consistent with what you said, Ed, where they don't know what they're doing. They're not good enough.
They're not seasoned airline pilots, and plus, also, I'm assuming they were trying to get to their destination as soon as they possibly could before the United States can go in and scramble fighter jets to go
72 Virgins.
Yeah, to go
why
shoot
didn't
them
they
down.
kick up the speed earlier? There was also the light poles outside the Pentagon, which basically they would have had their wings intact in order to take both of those down. There's an angle that it came in at.
Good point.
If it had fallen off before there somewhere, not only would they have recovered it and there would be a photo somewhere probably of it, but they wouldn't have knocked that down.
Well, again, I'm not gonna have an answer for everything here.
I mean, how did they outpilot these expert pilots who claim that they couldn't have done this?
Well, again, I mean, this is something.
But couldn't one argue, though, that with what they did with the Pentagon, that wouldn't have been the desired thing? You know, because like you said, Ed, you could have hit the top and done more damage. Because I know that I can't do anything in a plane. I have zero flying experience. But if I was hell-bent on dying and getting 72 Virgins, and you put me behind a plane cockpit, I bet I could do some damage somewhere or another.
Then why are you going to do a dangerous maneuver where you basically circle around instead of just going straight for it?
I don't know. Good point.
Especially when you were at a better angle to do that damage that you had set out to do.
Mm-hmm. No, I feel like the point I was making speaks to some points, but definitely not all. Definitely not all.
So how about the Shanksville flight? There's no visible wreckage from this. Like, you can see photos basically right after, and it's a hole in the ground far smaller than an airplane. Even the mayor of the town said there was no signs of a crash, basically just a hole in the ground. So the official story is the plane got buried. Almost every time a plane hits, essentially it's with the tail in the air. And, there obviously was supposedly some struggle beforehand and, going fast, gets out of control. How did it land in the ground, bury itself, and completely, with all the wreckage, and make a hole smaller than the size of the airplane? Especially seeing as how it hit it at a 45-degree angle. It's not like it just fell and plopped into it itself. What else? Basically, there was a big puff of smoke after, and then it wasn't smoking. If you look, again, YouTube, you can see millions of these. You can see airplanes that have crashed, and even when there's a lot of plane not left, it's very clear that there is wreckage in some part of an airplane there. Generally some bodies, seats, things like that. But never in the history of plane crashes has a plane just buried itself. There seemed to be a common theme here, which is there are a lot of firsts that happen that day, all at the same time, or all near the same time. They also found debris miles away from that one. So,
you're talking about the Shanksville,
Pennsylvania. Yeah, there was like some chunks found 2 miles away and some found 8 miles away.
So, Ed, one of the questions I have, though, is that if there were no terrorists, if this didn't happen, what's up with the Pennsylvania one then? So, I mean, did they not? There was nobody to take down? Is that whole story made up just to kind of?
Good question. It does beg the question if you start thinking, well, what happened to all the people? We have evidence that there were people on these flights.
Right.
I guess a couple things that there's a decent chance that these people actually did exist and people lost their lives. I'm not trying to downplay anybody
sure.
who may have lost their lives on that day. At least a portion of it is fabricated. It can be demonstrated that it was fabricated essentially. Also, there is a government program. This was an official program. Let's get the name of it. That they talked about using during the Cold War, where essentially they could switch a commercial airliner in flight with another airplane.
Okay.
But one way that that essentially these didn't happen is cell phones. So, cell phone technology, 2001. We know from earlier, we know that all the flight speed and heights are recorded. So, you know how fast the planes were going and how high they were.
Okay.
You lose cell signal the faster you're going and the higher you're going. If you're going too fast, essentially the way it works is you have this, you just think of a circle and think of it overlapping like a Venn diagram. And when you get into where they overlap, you essentially, it senses that and you move from one cell tower to the next. When you're going at very fast speeds, it's very difficult for you to, you can't switch in time, your call drops. In addition, once you get past a certain height, you're not going to get a signal. 2001, if you were on these flights, there is no possible way that you would have had a cell phone call all the way through. Immediately after the attack, there were many, many, many claims of people who had spoken to loved ones on cell phones. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of a given. Like they got to say their last goodbyes. That's how we knew about a lot of these stories and how they were terrorists on there from these stories.
And the heroes that brought these down.
Yep. So that has changed. Officially, there are only 2 cell phone calls now that were made. So there's actually a site online, official, that documents essentially all the people and their calls and who were on these flights. And it's kind of implied now that they were from not a cell phone, but every single last one of them was made, and it'll explicitly say this, but from a plane phone. And it has to be because it's been proven essentially impossible that you could make that from a cell phone. Their names were, let's see here, Edward Felt, he called 911 from the lavatory, and C.C. Lyles, a flight attendant, which actually, if you could find that one and cue it up, there is a conspiracy in itself of her final whisper on that
Which
flight.
one is it again, Ed? I'm sorry.
C.C. Lyles.
C.C. Lyles. Let me see if I can find it.
C-E-E-C-E-L-Y-L-E-S. So those are the only 2 officially, but there's also 7 other unofficially that are from FBI reports that say they were from cell phones. A lot of them said that the cell phones were clear with no background noise. Not what would be happening when A, you're on a flight, and B, there's chaos going on.
Definitely not, yeah.
Caller ID showed the cell phone number, so you know it was from the cell phone. And so the C.C. Lyles one at the very end.
And you said she's a flight attendant?
She was a flight attendant, where she whispers what sounds like it's a frame. Is this it?
This is it. I'm not sure if we're gonna get.
So you have on some of these where they basically said how they talked to these people the entire flight, and you know that's not possible because if they were actually on the 9/11 flight, not saying they weren't on a flight, if they were on actually the 9/11 flight, that at those heights and those speeds, they would have been disconnected many times.
Right. And please keep in mind, this is 2001 cell technology.
Yes.
Not 2017 cell technology.
There was a Japanese company, and it was like 2005 or 2006, I don't think I have it written down, who basically recreated it and proved that even 5 years later, you could not do that. That essentially they went on with newer cell phones and tried to do it, and they were all lost and disconnected. You only have to get a few thousand feet in the air, and you can't reach a cell phone tower.
I think I got it, Ed.
Okay.
Tuesday, 9:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I don't know what to say. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane. I'm trying to be calm. We're turned around, and I've heard that there's planes that's been flown into the World Trade Center. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
End of message.
Okay. You definitely hear somebody say it's a frame.
So,
hold on.
How do you account for all these cell
End of message.
Hold on a second.
End of message.
I'm having.
I think. before that.
Yeah, go back a little further. I think.
You just say it.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, go back a little further to where she's talking.
Right there.
Okay, it's a frame. What is that telling you?
That someone was putting her up to making that call, and that she's trying to say at the end that this is not realistic.
Yeah, that's. I'm sorry. That's a stretch.
Perhaps, but why else would she say that? And she definitely does.
How did she make that cell phone call?
I mean, we're looking at a whole bunch of different things here. I mean,
but the questions haven't been answered.
That's something, because there may not be a question to answer right there.
No, it's a very direct question.
She
How
does
were
say
these cell
it's a
phone
frame.
calls made?
It's a frame, but are we even sure she's saying that? Are we sure somebody else isn't saying that? Are we sure?
Somebody's saying it.
I'm
not sure she's saying it.
Somebody's saying it, but is it pertaining to it being a conspiracy? I mean, look, I think there's a lot of questionable things that have been brought up tonight. That though, I mean, that's something
so drop that. Answer the real question. How do you explain the cell phone calls?
I don't know. I'm not a cell phone expert or anything.
But
like that.
It is impossible for those to have happened with the official story.
With them calling, using a cell phone in the
yes, when
air?
you are over 10,000 feet in the air, traveling at 500 miles an hour, you cannot be making a phone call. You can't even. I mean, you won't even get signal.
Okay.
So the calls would have dropped. Some of these went the entire length of the flight.
Okay, I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna.
At what point does this go from just a bunch of coincidental evidence to, wow, the official story just really doesn't address some legitimate claims? What does it take to actually?
I don't know. These are pretty. I mean, in my opinion, they're pretty minuscule claims. I mean they are. I mean, we're talking cell phones. We're talking about. I mean, we're talking some pictures of the hijackers not being shown.
Evidence is a minuscule claim. I mean, really, because this amounts to evidence.
No, I'm not saying that all evidence is. I'm not saying everything here is a minuscule claim. I mean, I'm just saying that some things are definitely a stretch.
Jordan, I think, guys, part of my biggest problem with this is that I don't know how much of this I buy into. I truly don't, but I definitely hear all these things, and I feel that we're not being told the truth. I feel like that is. I feel like it's important. Was it Islamic terrorists? Maybe. Was it? I honestly have no idea. All I do know, or at least feel that I know, is that we're not being told the truth. Ed, I want to bring something up to you. I don't have a ton of information on this, but I have a feeling somewhere in your archives or in your memory you do. The leaseholder of the World Trade Center took out an insurance claim.
Yes.
Not too long before, and ended up making $7 billion.
That is correct.
When the towers went down. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah. Well, hold on a second. One thing that I've also been noticing here too is there's no consistency here as far as the conspiracy theories go.
There's not.
You're
absolutely
right. There's no one way where we can draw a direct correlation to one perpetrator, one mastermind, and all of
you. Adam, you are very right about that.
I mean,
I agree with that.
If we look at one area, okay, it's the government. If we look at another area, it's something completely different. It just seems like there's no consistent line here.
Hold on a second, because I don't think I've made the claim or yet of exactly how and why it went down, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, but. Mostly what I've been presenting have just been questions, which for the most part I haven't actually received an answer in any of my questions I've presented. Mm-hmm. And if anything I presented is inconsistent, please bring it to me. But what's inconsistent about anything I've brought up?
I'm not saying that your claims are inconsistent for you. I mean, you're bringing up a lot of claims, and I'm sure, and they've been out there, and that's true. What I'm saying is that, Ed, you're not the one that's bringing up these claims.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one that's found these claims, that's looked into them, and that's something that I can certainly appreciate. However, the people that are bringing up these claims, I can't find any which direction which these are leading to.
Adam, you are certainly correct that these cannot all be true. Every conspiracy cannot be true. They often contradict each other. But what doesn't contradict is the idea that the story we've been presented is false.
It all contradicts that, actually, the true story. That's basically all of it. Almost everything I brought today, I actually didn't even bring a whole lot of conspiracy-related things, but essentially was just questioning the main
Official
narrative.
Story,
the official narrative. And because honestly, you can go in a lot of different directions and a lot of loony stuff with the conspiracies, but I think the starting point and the point you can find that is actually true is that the official story is bunk. It's bogus. When you start to question it, you just realize how ridiculous it actually is. I mean, there are plenty of points on it that can be disproven, very openly questioned without getting a sufficient answer. That doesn't mean that I think every conspiracy is true, or anybody else who thinks that 9/11 basically isn't how it happened officially. But it's a good starting point, and it's necessary if you want to find out what really happened. If you can so as much find out it really happened, you have to question the official narrative.
I did find this one video of, and I hate doing this. I hate going on and just finding YouTube stuff on here because,
Sometimes you have to. It is true, Adam. You don't want to base your conspiracy knowledge or anti-conspiracy knowledge solely on YouTube videos. Although it really is the best and easiest way to get going on certain things, but yeah, I mean, a lot. You're right, though, Adam. A lot of YouTube videos.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not, like I said, I didn't screen this video before. If we're gonna put it up, I like I said, I don't know if they're talking or not. Are you leaving, Josh, for a second? Okay. I'll play when he gets back then.
No, you're good.
Oh, you're good. Well, I want you to hear it.
You're right here, man.
This is supposedly debunking the cell phone calls now.
Right back.
This is supposedly debunking the cell phone calls not being fake. Do you guys want to hear it? It's like 3 minutes.
Go for it.
And I know we got to be wrapping up soon too.
No, absolutely. And Ed's got a little bit more to say, but no, we're good. Play it up.
Okay. I mean, like I said, I didn't listen to it at all. I'm just. Oh, we're gonna have to sit here and read it.
Oh, never mind that. I don't do reading.
I hate reading.
What about the cell phone calls?
Oh, wait, here we go.
For starters, the calls themselves are extremely peculiar. The cell phone calls were fake. No question about it.
Oh, come on. I don't want to have to sit here and read it to these people.
Reading is such hard work. Why do we even bother to learn it?
Okay, well, what they're saying here. Okay, well, let me stop it. What they're saying here is, however, the study is flawed. I'm assuming the one that you were bringing up, not your study, the study that you're bringing up. That study is flawed because they say nearly all the calls were made from seatback earphones, not cell phones, which should work well in flight. Hold on, let me go on here. I love the dramatic music too. Let's see. It looks like the study by making these cell phone calls while flying over the heavily populated London, Ontario, where there was more interference. Who was the one that? Did you get the guy who made that? Who did the original study? Ed?
No.
It's a weird name. It looks like it's like Dudeny,
That might be
WDNEY. Okay.
Never heard of them. Next.
Yeah, it doesn't ring any bells.
Let's see here. The cell phone calls from the hijacked planes were made over rural areas with less interference. Additionally, base stations are designed to have shit.
The cell phone call.
Let's see. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. Additionally, base stations are designed to have a much shorter range of about 328 feet over inner cities and about 9.2 miles over rural areas. So the cell phone calls were definitely able to be made, although as both AT&T's Alexa Graph and WirelessWeek.com's agree, most calls will eventually be dropped, at least in 2001. Of the 64 calls placed from the hijacked planes, only 2 were from cell phones. That's the claim here.
Okay. Officially, although from FBI reports you can glean 7 others.
Both were on Flight 93 and both were made at 9:58 when the plane was less than 2,000 feet above the Appalachian Mountains. One of the callers, Edward Felt, estimated they were about 300 feet from the ground. Both were dropped in under 2 minutes, according to this. I don't know how much longer this is gonna... Still, many question the content of the call, such as why Mark Bingham would introduce himself to his mother using his first and last name.
I was staying with my brother Vaughn on the morning of September 11th, and the phone rang.
Mom, this is Mark Bingham.
Once in a while, he would say that. He would call up, and he was a young businessman, and used to introduce himself on the phone as Mark Bingham, and he was trying to be strong and level-headed and strictly business. Mom, this is Mark Bingham.
I don't think you introduce yourself as Mark Bingham to your mom.
No.
Ever. I don't care how well, how put into the business world you are.
So that's the thing is I'm not convinced, if you want to go into conspiracies about this, that these people didn't exist and weren't on an airplane. I just don't think they were on the flights that went into those places.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
But but there's some answers there for you as far as the cell phones and the height and
what was the answer?
Well, I mean, there's some explanation. Whether or not you think it's answer or not is up for debate with anybody else. But I mean, as far as for the most part, these were over rural areas until they made them back into...
What about when they were over 10,000 feet in height? There were several people who maintained their phone call during the entirety of the flight.
Okay, well, we're also talking about people, too, who are... the plane is gone. I mean, there's no way that we can go back and really for sure trace...
Well, you have the cell records because you can tell when the calls are disconnected. They actually have those records.
Okay, but what I'm saying is we have. I mean, there's an explanation right here as far as why these cell phone calls could have been placed and could have been kept throughout a certain duration of time. I mean, whether or not they lasted longer than that or shorter than that, okay, then there's something else that needs to be answered. However, first, but the bare thing right now is perhaps maybe they could have been made, whereas 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago, I mean, we were discussing them not being able to be made at all.
Well, maybe I'm being misunderstood. I'm saying they were definitely made. I'm saying that...
You're saying the cell phones were definitely made.
Yeah, these phone calls were definitely made. These phone calls were definitely made. Not only that, but the government is trying to make it seem as if not many were made, because once you realize that it was impossible for them to be made during the official story, you start to wonder, well, where the heck were these things being made from?
Curious. No, this is very, very curious. Ed, I would like you... I don't have a whole lot more to say, but I definitely don't want to cut you guys off if you got more good stuff. Ed, I would like to at least hear something about the leaseholder in the $7 billion.
Well, yeah, I want to. Let's finish with you because obviously you have the most information here. But we do have to start wrapping up, though.
Okay. Yeah, no, for sure. I
can maybe just real quick some things about maybe the history of the World Trade Center real quick. You're asking me about Larry Silverstein. So
yes, Larry Silverstein. Who's that again?
He's the owner of the Twin Tower. He originally owned Building 7, and then July 24th of 2001, not too long before this happened, he purchased the building. So it's kind of often thought that these buildings were like the jewels of New York, like there were these amazing buildings, which is actually not the case. So they were built. The construction of them started prior to asbestos restrictions.
I thought they were kind of ugly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they're just these big rectangles. But the asbestos restrictions essentially sort of finished as the tower was finishing up, like they came into effect.
It's strange, too, by the way, because if they had any asbestos in them at all, then their ability to burn would be greatly diminished.
Yes.
Asbestos is an excellent building material.
There
always has been, and it is excellent fire retardant. The reason we do not use asbestos products in building anymore is because asbestos causes cancer. Not because it isn't an excellent building product. It isn't. It is and always was an excellent building product and an excellent fire retardant.
You just don't want to inhale it.
Right. It's just, it's very bad for us, so we got rid of it. We did not get rid of asbestos because it wasn't good for its, intended, for what it's intended for. We got rid of asbestos because it causes cancer.
Yep. So, and there were 400 tons of asbestos in those buildings. To show you, that's a lot of asbestos.
Yeah.
So each they all had open floor plans. So basically, like I explained earlier, it was just this. They had the center and then the trusses. So it was basically these gigantic office buildings, which became very expensive to heat and cool, and the communication systems were out of date as well as the electrical. And those systems were estimated to take over $800 million just to rebuild. The 1993 bombings caused a lower occupancy. People were a little more hesitant, so it wasn't like this big cash cow that it had once been. In addition to the asbestos restrictions, because of that, they had to basically remove that every time they renovated a floor, which is extremely expensive. The asbestos abatement was estimated at basically $1 billion. That's not something that was really going to be worth it for them.
And in no way an exaggeration, as somebody that I have a lot of experience in the construction industry, asbestos removal is something that is oftentimes required, but is almost always impossible to do in a usable manner, in a usable and a financially feasible manner. So, but I don't mean to interrupt. Please continue.
Oh, that's fine. So Larry Silverstein, who owned Building 7, decided he was going to purchase these two buildings with a lot of issues. He immediately took out a $3.2 billion insurance policy, $3.2 billion insurance policy, and then proceeded to spend every morning in the towers except for on September 11th, because in which he had a business meeting scheduled for, because his wife told him that she had made him a dermatology appointment. The only morning he didn't spend there after he bought it. He then wanted $7 billion, even though he pulled out a $3.2 billion insurance policy because it was two separate attacks. He actually ended up settling for $4.5 billion. So he stood to gain a pretty penny from this.
So the guy just wants to take...
He got $800 million for Building 7, too.
So the guy just wants to take care of his skin, and he's getting shit for it.
Yeah. So on the topic of Building 7, it is officially the first building to collapse due to fire, after catching fire from something from, the crash of the original two towers. It had a very symmetrical freefall, so it was this burning building that had a symmetrical freefall that essentially resembled a demolition. NIST would not release their model for it. It collapsed from the bottom, like you might expect a demolition to in some cases. Actually, most demolitions come from the bottom, not from the top. That was one thing that is different about the Twin Towers, is that the majority go the other way. Now, there are plenty of big buildings that have come from the top, but most of them do get demolished from the bottom. There were dozens of police and firemen who knew the building was about to come down. There was even a countdown beforehand. There was a very cryptic remark from its owner of pull it. There was Kevin McFadden was a first responder who actually said he heard a countdown, and then after the countdown, it basically came down. I don't know. Maybe he knew it was coming down and he just wanted people to get out. But
the stuff I heard about about Building 7 is that at that time, firemen were looking to save lives instead of put fires out. So
I've heard this as well. Yeah.
So instead of fighting the fire, they were letting it burn. Well, not maybe so much letting it burn, but that wasn't their priority at the time. Their priority was to try to get people out. As far as it collapsing, from what I've heard, is that the location of it on that property, the foundation wasn't as deep as the other buildings on that same property because of subway tunnels below it. So the trusses, the beams, whatever.
So the foundation was not as structurally perfect.
Exactly.
Because it did have
exactly
underground rails.
So
exactly.
This, along with, I mean, the question that I still don't have an answer for, that NIST doesn't even have an answer for, is how is it for the first time in recorded history we have 3 buildings that all collapse at near free fall speed? Collapse.
I don't know. I'm not a physicist. I don't know how to answer the question, so I'm not going to answer the question.
Just for maybe you or anybody out there listening, there's plenty of it on YouTube. Just YouTube building collapses. You can see a bunch of old buildings that are falling down. Nothing ever free falls. You generally have a chunk of the building still left when it collapses. It's not like it just implodes and becomes nothing on the ground. It's not like... So these buildings were pulverized. If you went to the base, not only did it collapse, but there was not much left of it either. That doesn't happen in a collapse. You still have debris everywhere. You have bodies. They really didn't find any bodies. Like, they meticulously combed everything at ground zero. In a typical building collapse, you would have crushed bodies, but you would have bodies nonetheless. You didn't find that.
Well, how many people made it out? How many people made it out below the floors that were hit?
18.
18 people made it out?
Yes. 18 people rescued from the debris.
No, I'm talking about before the time the building collapsed.
I do not know.
Yeah, I'm assuming a lot of people made it out. And the people that were...
Well, even if there's 100 people, you would expect to find at least a couple bodies.
But if you have that amount of debris on you, I mean, would you still expect to find intact bodies?
Large buildings have fallen out, not quite that large, and they've found intact bodies.
See, I guess I don't disagree. I guess I actually disagree with that. That you wouldn't find.
But what caused it to be pulverized? Like, it was basically like nothing there. Why is what was left of that collapse so much different than any other building's collapse? And the answer is usually because it was a large building.
Well, I mean, from the pictures I saw, it seemed like there were some pretty large pieces there. I mean, I don't know. I don't collapse buildings for a living, so I really don't know. But from what I saw, I mean, like I said, I thought that there were larger pieces, and when you get, when you how many stories was the World Trade Center?
110.
Was it 110?
Yeah.
I mean, when you get a 110-story building, multiple buildings coming down on each other, I'm assuming that.
Right.
that the rubble is going to be whatever large chunks you did have originally were going to be
in a super important point. Do you guys believe that Biggie Smalls, the notorious B.I.G., predicted the World Trade Center falling?
What did he say?
You never thought that hip hop would take it this far. Now I'm in the limelight because I rhyme tight. Time to get paid, blow up like the World Trade. He said that before he died, and now that...
when did he say it? How earlier?
I don't know. He was dead before
the World Trade Center.
Yes, and many believe, although that when you hear the song on YouTube now, that last part is taken out.
No, I don't.
Last part is taken out, but some believe that his Illuminati, that this song in particular, this not that famous of a song, was supposed to be a
I don't.
ode to.
What was the line again?
You never thought that hip-hop would take it this far. Now I'm in the limelight because I rhyme tight. Time to get paid, blow up like the World Trade.
Well, there was the 93 bomb.
There was.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, and even then, I mean, the 93 World Trade Center bombing was a pretty big event.
The song is
New York.
juicy.
You get a terrorist attack on one of the, the biggest, arguably the most famous landmark.
What is kind of strange is that that song has been edited largely.
Well,
since 9/11, that part of the song is taken out.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised it would have been taken out. It's
guys, before we go to Pumpkin, this show is coming to a close. This has been a great show. I feel like this is one of these shows that we provided very few true answers. We provided a lot more questions than answers. We threw a lot more out there, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. We threw a lot out there for you to discuss. We didn't. We were not married to one side. And that's kind of what I like about our Deep Issues shows, because so many other things on the internet are going to be so biased towards one way or the other. Our shows are not. Our shows are not. We throw stuff out there. We want you to listen to it. We want you to think. I don't have much more to say, and we don't have a ton more time. But Adam, Ed, is there anything else you want to add? We're not talking, an hour here, but if there's something else that you really want to say, now's the time.
Pull your head onto the sand. What is it? What does it take? I mean, how many questions do you need to really start questioning something and think, wow, I'm being lied to? I mean, I guess personally, I feel like if this isn't enough, then I kind of wonder what would make somebody change their mind.
Yeah, I don't. I do not disagree with that statement in any way. Adam, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just look. I don't think that we were told the entire truth to what happened. But do I think it was an inside job? No, I do not. I think that 9/11 was a perfect display of a government being unprepared and a government not taking threats seriously, and perhaps having that mentality that something like that could never happen here. And it did. And I think a lot of the missteps, a lot of the questions being asked are potentially a government trying to protect their own screw up, more so than anything else. Who I think did this? I think terrorists from the Middle East did this because they were upset with our way of life over here. They're upset with our freedoms that we have over here, and that's it.
I don't know. When it's all said and done here at the end of this show, I don't think Adam and Ed's viewpoints are actually that far from each other. I know that you guys
shut up.
I know that you guys could pick apart the nuances till the end of time. But I actually don't think you guys' viewpoints are that different, and I feel like that although you two are not that far away from each other, I think that I'm
sitting
somewhere
pretty close to him.
I think I actually fall somewhere in between the proximity of you guys, and I really, truly do
I mean,
believe...
that's right there. I'm right here.
No, that's not true. That's not true. You two are closer to each other than you are to
Let me get the wide camera here so everyone can see.
Adam, your proximity joke is not working.
So I've got the camera up here. We're talking about proof tonight. I'm sitting with the ace hat. I mean, if you're looking at us from the front door,
see how easy it is to provide evidence and video and pictures. Why can't the government do this?
No, but all I'm saying is that I
No
believe
response.
that I believe that one is foolish to not acknowledge that you're not really being told the whole truth here.
And
do I believe that it was an inside job planned by Bush and Cheney? Not necessarily. And that's something that I don't even think we talked enough about exactly. But I also do believe that there are darker forces at work here than just a couple crazy terrorists. And I think this needs to be analyzed, And I hope that if you wish to analyze this, that this show was a help.
Well, and I just want to make mention of this too. That even though I don't disagree, or I don't agree with Ed, I can definitely appreciate the steps that he's taken.
Sick research.
Yeah,
Sick
I mean,
research,
and
bro.
looking and making that decision for himself. I mean, he's not just somebody that watches a documentary on 9/11 truthism and makes his decision from that. I mean, obviously, Ed, you've gone through with this, and you've probably looked at every single aspect you could and made your decision based off of that. And I can definitely respect that. I mean, I don't agree with the outcomes with it, but like I said, I can appreciate the time and the research and everything that is put into it, which is far more than other people out there who are a truther themselves, or B, somebody that completely denies everything.
I agree, Adam. And do you know what else I will say is that listen, even after this show, this is a tough one for me. All right. My favorite part of the show is when we analyze, how we feel and whether or not the discussion on said show has, changed something or determined the way we feel about something. But I will say this, and I'm not just saying this to kiss up to my co-hosts here, but as the guy that I'm unsure about a lot of this, I don't know what to think about so much of this. It was a pleasure to sit with someone who believes, some of the stuff about 9/11 that is controversial, and someone who believes some of the things that is traditional, and to sit with two intelligent people who make really good points. And you both have made really good points tonight. You both have really gone out of your way, actually, to show how you feel. So I feel like this has been a good show. I hope the people out there listening thought it was a good show. You guys really made some excellent points tonight. So thank you, Ed. Thank you, Adam. And thanks to Kyle for lending me scientific insight as well. You guys ready to pick the next topic? Going to Pumpkin here?
Sure.
Ed, can you trust Pumpkin? Is Pumpkin like the government, or is
Probably.
Pumpkin true?
Well, Pumpkin isn't, but Adam is, and he's the one who stuffs it in there, so...
Okay, Ed has selected our next Deep Issues cast from Pumpkin, the mythical, the all-knowing Pumpkin, and Adam is about to read it. Our next Deep Issues show is when, Adam?
Next Deep Issues. You see, now you're putting me on the spot.
I did it on purpose. I knew you didn't have the calendar up.
Hold on.
It is, the second Tuesday. I don't think October
10th.
Is October 10th? There's no fifth Tuesday in September because I think we just had it. So, okay, October 10th then.
October 10th. So we will have several regular episodes of the Xcast in between now and then. But October 10th will be our next Deep Issues show. God willing and Godspeed to Ed and his family, who hopefully will have a healthy new baby in between then and now. We're praying for him for him and his family, that everything works out great. But the XCast must go on. And after our several regular shows, our next Deep Issues cast will be Adam.
Whoops, I ripped it.
Oh, Pumpkin's gonna kill you.
Wait a second.
No,
I'm calling a default on this.
Okay, veto default
because we already had this.
Okay. This is definitely not the show, but just tell us what it was.
It was Star Wars.
Oh, we already did that.
Yeah, we already did that. I don't know why.
Okay.
Sorry, Ed, do it again.
Yes, we had a great day Star Wars Theory show with our special guest, Brad Davis, who is our Star Wars expert. Well, our second Star Wars expert next to me.
Ed, you know your Star Wars, right?
A little bit. Ed knows Star Wars, yeah. Don't let him fool you. He knows his Star Wars very well.
Is he being modest?
He's being modest.
All right, here we go. The October 10th Deep Issues podcast will be... What the... Are you kidding me?
Is Pumpkin messing with you tonight, dude? What was this one? It said Star Wars again. Did somebody break into the studio and just pump a bunch of Star Wars?
This is great.
What is it actually in Pumpkin? This is making me question
wait, hold on.
the legitimacy of Pumpkin.
If it's Star Wars again, we better discuss Star Wars.
No,
we don't like Star Wars here, if you can't.
Yeah, we love Star Wars, but we've already had the show, and we deemed that it was not a Deep Issues. We did it on a regular show.
All right, are we ready?
Okay, yes. If it's Star Wars, that's going to kick you in the nuts.
All right, this is actually a new one that we were talking about not two weeks ago. The October 10th episode of Deep Issues. This is kind of this is one of those where it can be, what's the word I'm looking for?
Controversial.
Yes. There we go. Thank you. The Dark Web.
Ah, yes. Oh my God. Oh, this is a good one. This is going to be a good one. The Dark Web. I cannot wait for this.
Yep. Dark Web.
I'm a big nerd about this one. Okay, so... in between now and then, we're going to have several episodes, regular episodes of the XCast here. I hope you tune in.
Give me a second here. I gotta cue up the music. So keep talking.
I will. I'll keep talking. I'm good at that. I love the sound of my own voice. That's why I podcast. But we will be in between then. We'll be talking about current events. We'll be talking about sports. We'll be talking about whatever the heck me and Adam feel like talking about in between now and then. But please tune into those shows, same time, same channel, theempiremedia.com, or right here on Facebook Live.
I'm still not ready yet, so keep talking.
And it will be great. 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on theempiremedia.com. But on October 10th, tune in for more Deep Issues. Hopefully Ed will be here, even though he will be a new dad again. He'll have a new bundle of joy at home, we hope. So, so hopefully he'll be here, but if he's not, well, maybe he'll miss a show. Who knows? Hopefully Kyle Puska will be here as well. Thank you so much to Adam Hernandez, our producer. Thank you so much to Ed Zaharsky, our Deep Issues expert. Thank you so much to Kyle Puska, our call-in expert. And thank you so much to me, Josh Houslander, the host of the XCast, right here on theempiremedia.com. Tune in, same time, same channel, next week. Thank you so much. We will see you soon. Hope you enjoyed it.